No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today I'm here with Drakeo the Ruler's lawyer. Introduce yourself.
My name is John Hamasaki. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I'm based in San Francisco. This is the first real case I've dealt with in LA, and I've learned a lot about the Los Angeles criminal justice system and policing and prosecutors down here, which has been horrifying. But
how did you get wrapped up in this if you're typically doing law in San Francisco, and this is a very LA case?
This is that's a fair statement. This is a very LA case, and I've gotten LA for dummies over the 2 months of the trial this summer.
Right.
So I originally became involved in a case of a Richmond Bay Area rapper, Laz the Boy, where it was another case where prosecutors were prosecuting somebody based in part on their hip hop lyrics, really focusing on it. And this was about 4 years ago, and there was started to be a national conversation around this. There was a New York Times piece and an LA Times piece actually that discussed that case. And so I got a lot more involved in all of the issues surrounding the prosecution of artists by law enforcement and prosecutors. And so I got to know sort of a community of academics, advocates, artists that were all, saw this issue happening, saw it unfolding in our court system, saw the way it was being used to target, harass, and prosecute and imprison young Black artists primarily. And so there's what was the description for Jeff Weiss?
I said, what did I say? I said something about he's just a gatekeeper, a pillar of just a watcher, the guy who's really sort of just been doing the Lord's work, documenting LA hip hop nonstop, regardless of the extent to which it's popular. Like, that doesn't really matter so much to Jeff. It's like he's paying attention and documenting important stuff going on in the culture, and it's a very valuable service.
Yeah. So Jeff was following the case. I think Jeff was one of the people who early on really appreciated Drakeo's talent.
Long before any kind of legal trouble, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so he wasn't one of the people who was just kind of like, hey, jump on the Drakeo kind of movement. And so he kind of saw what was happening and saw that Drakeo was just getting abused by the LA court system. And realized they needed somebody who had experience in these type of issues and had experience with the prosecution of rappers. And so he reached out to one of the academics, a guy named Eric Nielsen, who's a professor at the University of Richmond. And Eric and I have known each other since back from that case about 4 or 5 years ago. And he said, hey, if it's in California, you got to talk to John. And at first I was just going to consult with the lawyer that was working on the case and try to help him out. And then it became apparent that my presence here would be of benefit.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So in terms of the actual case, because the reason why so much of this is based on lyrics and things that have been done in music videos and such is because there really isn't any evidence tying Drakeo to this case. It all stems back to this shooting that took place at it was a pajama party of some sort.
That's correct. A pajama jam.
Right. And more or less, a couple of guys show up. They see some guys that they don't like. They shoot at them. A couple guys get hit, but one of them dies. And Drakeo the Ruler was nowhere to be found. Wasn't supposed to be there. Wasn't anywhere nearby, right?
Well, no, he was actually there, and he did know the shooters.
Oh, okay.
But just to be clear, and that's all been public. He's never hidden from that.
But did he actually even make it into the party? Didn't he show up and not even actually enter?
Yeah. So they were hanging out, and a group of people just kind of, I think the term used was parking lot pimping,
right.
And some people who had disagreements with another person about certain things had guns and shot him.
And so those people knew Draco, but there's no evidence to suggest that he directed them to go there to deal with anyone.
Well, no. That was the famous RJ conspiracy theory, right? Which I think you've probably heard about.
Yeah, the idea that Greedo had gone there basically to pursue and potentially kill fellow LA rapper RJ, even though RJ was not supposed to be there, was not there, never intended to be there, was not billed as being there, and he himself has said that he didn't believe that Draco had any desire to kill him at that time.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it was. Thankfully, the jurors were able to see through it, but the prosecution, they really believe. I don't know if I want to say believed in that, but that's the theory they pushed. Anybody, and this is some of the things I've learned about LA and LA culture and parties down here. This was not some party that RJ would be at, right? This was a low-key, janky kind of party in a warehouse with not that many people. Like it's just like not. It wasn't credible. It wasn't reasonable. It wasn't logical. There was no reason RJ would be there, but that was a way they could bring him into the case, and tie him to the shooting and say he was there with this group of people that were really there to kill RJ, even though RJ was never going to be there, and then they killed somebody else.
Right. Yeah. And so Draco's name gets inserted into the conversation surrounding this murder because the detectives are listening to a wiretap to an unrelated case, and they hear Draco's name said. Is that correct? Yeah.
So what happened is at the time, Draco had a pretty flashy Mercedes that people knew. And people saw him leave after the shooting, and people like, oh, there goes Draco's car. Draco did it, because he's obviously the big name of anybody at this party.
Right.
And so that's how the rumors started. And then the detective essentially gets the name and starts watching music videos.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you watch Draco's videos, I mean, there's a lot of lean, there's a lot of guns, there's a lot of just him with his homies hanging out. You could see how, from somebody's perspective, if they wanted to paint him as a villain, that they could just take a look at his music videos and think, oh, there's a whole lot of ammunition to work with here.
Yeah, but I would I think kind of looking back at hip hop and rap historically, the one thing the prosecutors and the police were not able to do is accept that a young black man who grew up in South Central like Draco could actually be an artist. Right. And this is like nobody in the real world outside of the prosecution team, who's reviewed Draco's history, his music, what people have said about him, have doubted him as being an artist, but they wanted to remove it from all of the context of art and say, this is a young black guy talking about, things that exist in South Central Los Angeles, shooting, guns, drugs, lean, and say, because he's rapping about it, well, therefore he must be doing it.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
But it's a real problem. It's a real outrage, and it's being done all over California.
And I was just reading the article that came out today in The Guardian about this case, and I guess they honed in on, really specified this one lyric where Draco just says something like "chopper make 'em go," which is like, if you know about rap, you know that's just, any rapper could just say that. It's like rappers say casual lines about guns and violence all the time. There's no need to read into it. That is the most generic rap lyric that is not meant to say that he committed any sort of specific action at all. The idea that lyric would be put under a microscope is, quite frankly, terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what got me out of San Francisco down to LA was, Jeff Weiss reached out to Eric, and Eric put us in touch. And then, I talked to Draco from jail a few times, and what he was telling me, I was like, doing criminal work, people tell you a lot of things that once you start to review the case, might be a little bit of a stretched interpretation or might not be supported by the actual evidence.
Right.
So I actually flew down here and sat in a visiting room with him at Men's Central Jail for like 4 hours the first time. And we just went over everything. And I was like, man, this seems all, what he's saying seems all credible and right and supported by the evidence. But why are the prosecutors and the police over here? And, you know, when I did actually get a hold of the discovery, the police reports, the grand jury transcript, it really was as horrifying as I think people have imagined it to be.
Right. And so this case has already been to trial, and Drakeo was found not guilty on the vast majority of his counts aside from like possession of a firearm, correct?
Correct. I mean, and to be clear, so I think it's important that people understand from somebody who, even by their own theory, didn't know the murder was going to happen, but they still prosecuted him. They sought what's called special circumstances murder, which is essentially makes you death eligible. And they kept the death penalty on the table against Drakeo up until right before trial. So they were seeking death up until a few more months before trial for somebody that, by their own witnesses and evidence, did not know the shooting was going to occur, did not encourage the shooting to occur, did not want the shooting to occur.
But their argument is that because Drakeo was part of what is really a rap group called the Stink Team, but which they were trying to portray as a gang, which is actually really notable because Drakeo is like one of the few LA rappers who, for the most part, has basically avoided really characterizing himself as part of a gang.
Right. I mean,
Stink Team has always been a rap group. Everybody has always regarded it as that. To call it a gang is really kind of stretching the interpretation of what a gang is. The Stink Team was not a gang in the sense that, you know, the Pyrus are a gang, or
right.
that, you know, the any of the various Crip sets around LA are a gang. But they're saying that because they consider the Stink Team a gang, and because there was potentially violent acts carried out by members of the Stink Team, it doesn't matter that Drakeo wasn't aware of those acts or that he had anything to do with planning them, alleged acts, but it's because he would have ultimately benefited from those acts as a member of this gang, which is actually a rap group.
So that's the 182.5 charge, and that's the one that is especially problematic. I think it's been there's been a fair amount of writing about it by journalists and people in the legal profession, because there was a pretty infamous, famous case in San Diego of a rapper named Tiny Do, who was, you know, by the prosecution's theory, gang affiliated, but, you know, by some prosecution's theory, anybody that grows up in a community that has gangs in it and they know gang members, they're gang affiliated, right? So
there are a lot of different levels to which you can be in a gang. We know a lot of people
right.
who grew up on a Crip block. They might say Crip once in a while. They might wear a blue hat once in a while, but they don't take any sort of action in terms of any sort of criminal behavior. And then there's some people who actually become part of those organizations in a more
right.
serious way.
And so this guy, his name is Brandon Duncan, and he's actually him and Aaron Harvey, who are the two of the defendants who were charged in San Diego like this, have reached out and tried, offered to help, and they're actually helping with this case and getting the word out, which has been great. But in that case, the judge took a look at it and dismissed the 182.5 charges. Here, in this case, the jury hung on those, meaning there was a mistrial declared because the jury couldn't reach a verdict. The charge was 7-5 for acquittal. And a juror reached out to me afterwards, the day afterwards, because he was just, you know, really so moved in a negative way by things that the prosecution had done, to let me know, hey, you know, even on that count, we were 10-2 up until the last vote for acquittal. And so the other charge that he's still facing, again, that was final, 10-2 for acquittal. So generally, in my experience, prosecutors, you don't refile when somebody has 10 out of 12 jurors voting to acquit them. And, you know, not being an LA attorney, I spoke to a group of LA attorneys out here and just hey, what do you think's going to happen? Will they refile? They're like, no way. There's no reason, But they've made a decision. They announced it last month that they want to proceed and try to give him life in prison.
All right. And do you think is it that there's a particular beef with Drakeo from Detective Hardiman or any other officers that have just a real sheer animosity for the guy? Or is this a case where it's just sort of the LAPD as a whole just not wanting to see a real true LA gangster rapper flourish?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was the detective in this case. This became, I believe, somewhat of an obsession for him. It was a really strange case to review because, pretty soon, within a few weeks, or I'm sorry, within a month afterwards, they knew who the shooters were, right? Drakeo didn't have anything to do with the shooting. They knew that. They had an informant who testified who said, no, actually the shooting broke out and Drakeo thought that they were being shot at and ducked under the steering wheel, right? Was just trying to avoid the gunfire. That's been undisputed, right? So, I don't know, the idea that it's why the detective focused on him, I don't know. I mean, maybe, trying to get in somebody else's head is tough. There's a lot of challenges that I've, you learn about even outside of LA, about LA policing, right? This is actually LA Sheriff's Department. It's not LAPD.
Okay.
LAPD actually went through a series of reforms over the past, 15, 20 years. And I think there's still some challenges within the Sheriff's Department.
Okay. So you think this might sort of be almost like a relic of like an old time LA cop mentality where they're sort of being allowed to prosecute him in a way that maybe wouldn't fly with the LAPD? Generally there's checks and balances in our criminal justice system. And if a police bring a case that shouldn't be prosecuted, the DA will usually step in and say, no, we're not going to file charges. We're not going to prosecute this person. But in this case, it was the DA's office and this detective working together since the beginning of the case. And I don't know why they wanted Drakeo. The only, I can have a dozen theories. He was a trophy. He's brash. He's definitely outspoken. He'll admit himself. He's an asshole. It's just kind of his demeanor is that he really is not the kind of guy who's all too worried about what you think of him. So I could imagine certainly he could have sort of rubbed some people the wrong way on a personal level.
Definitely. I mean, but on another personal,
great guy. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, no, it's like Drakeo's a good dude, and I got to know him pretty well going through trial for 2 months. 8 hours a day, sitting next to a person, visiting them in jail, talking on the phone, reviewing all of the discovery and things they were alleging. He's a guy who's come up from nothing, created something for himself, and has, our criminal justice system trying to take everything away in a way that just isn't warranted, isn't justified. Yeah.
Are you representing any of the other members of the Stink team? Because a lot has been made about their situations being even sort of more severe. I know Ralphie the Plug has already pled guilty to something, right? He's already accepted some years.
No, Ralphie is a real example of like tragic collateral damage of their focus on Drakeo. So the focus on the Sting team really was all about getting to Drakeo. And so, earlier you said that some of the members of the Stink team were involved in violence. That's actually not accurate.
That's not what's been alleged. It was credit card fraud that they
Yeah, I
charged
mean, it was
Ralphie
like
with, right?
glorified petty crime, right? Things that would be misdemeanors, things that you go to,
Most average LA teenager type crime ever that you would never expect to be wrapped up into this sort of case.
Right. And that was part of the, I was like, and they're like, they're a gang of.
Sorry. People walking around upstairs. It's not the best studio we got here.
It's all right. It's nice. It works. Yeah, no, but like, they went after all of these guys so hard. And there was a video where somebody had tagged Fuck Too Snitchy about a guy who was stink team that had given some information to the police. In a music video, right?
And they treated that like witness intimidation or something?
And so, yeah, and they used all these outtakes, and everybody's laughing and joking around, and it's not like, it's not witness intimidation. It was like a group of young guys screwing around and just kind of slamming a friend who had done something dumb.
Right.
And so they tagged the witness intimidation with a gang enhancement. So now these guys are facing life in prison for tagging a wall and not even like, I mean, like it's and they went hard, and it's not like, generally this is such low level conduct, and in LA where you have actual crime and actual violence,
right?
The amount of resources that has been spent prosecuting these guys has been, outrageous. And so Ralphie they joined him with Drakeo and with the other defendant at trial. And he went through trial and was actually convicted on some counts relating to burglaries. I think he was acquitted of the vandalism, and he was acquitted of the witness intimidation, I believe, to my memory. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you this: what do you, from your perspective, what needs to happen in Drakeo's upcoming trial in order for him to avoid the majority, the long sentences that are being thrown around? Like, what needs to be proven that didn't take place this prior trial?
So this is what you were talking before, or you mentioned before that I didn't actually follow up on, about the benefit aspect, right?
Right.
And so the thing in the allegation is that he somehow benefited because a killing that he didn't know was going to happen happened, and that improved his reputation and it was beneficial to him. And this was, there was LA gangs involved here. The individual that was killed was a member of the Bloods. And, for somebody like Drakeo, being accused of killing a member of the Bloods is not a benefit, right? That's pretty much a death sentence.
Would make his life very complicated, yeah. Very
complicated. And, I think there's certainly been repercussions since then, since people believed the prosecution theory and said, oh yeah, Drakeo had something to do with this. So, there's a way that these gang cases are prosecuted, and they say everything is for the benefit of the gang, but this is a little different when they're saying that somebody who had nothing to do with the killing benefits.
Right.
And they say because Drakeo's name is Drakeo the Ruler, he's the leader of the Stink Team gang, right? Which, we like, the instinct is to laugh about it if it wasn't so serious, because it seems so, farcical, but
right.
That's life.
Are we supposed to believe that Master P is really some sort of military leader of the No Limit Army,
that and that's the thing. And I think that I'm glad the Guardian piece came out. I'm glad that people are paying attention. I'm glad that I'm glad that we're doing this and we're talking about it because, to the degree that this prosecution is allowed to continue and he's going to trial, I'm confident, but anything can happen in the trial. And, when you have an office like this, the prosecution in this case, not doing the right thing, right? I think the right thing would have been not to prosecute him in the first place, but certainly not to retry him. Then I think really people, it's helpful that people know about it and are educated and can speak out and reach out and try to stop the prosecution before it happens.
Is there anything realistically that people at home could do to like raise awareness about this? Do you imagine that the conversation about this case could potentially reach such a fevered pitch that the somehow higher ups in LA would be forced to maybe step in and say like, hey, maybe we should have some more eyeballs on how this case is being tried? Like, do you see that as a possibility?
I mean, so part of what I see underlying this reprosecution is actually an article written by Jeff Weiss in Fader. Did you have a chance to read that one?
I did. Masterpiece.
A masterpiece, beautifully written, very long, but extremely unkind to the prosecution and law enforcement. Brutal. And, whether it's fair or unfair, I don't think, nobody's called into question the truth of it.
Right.
I get the sense that they were really badly embarrassed by that article. They lost in a very public way at trial. And so really there has to be something that changes the momentum, right? Because, we're speaking about it and people are, people in the activist community and the civil rights community
they're starting to really get interested in this, right?
Yeah. But it's I think people, after he was acquitted of everything, kind of was like, okay. And I went back to San Francisco. I'm like, I'm done. That was great, But then, then when they refiled it, everybody was like, whoa, this is not right.
Right. And it's interesting too, because I mean, you've got like a Meek Mill who's sort of become the face of criminal justice reform in terms of hip hop and everything. Meek Mill is a huge name. He's a huge money earner for these corporations. And he's got people like Jay-Z behind him. When you look at Drakeo's like a god to LA, but he's still more of an underground rapper. He doesn't necessarily have these huge industry cosigns to go to bat for him. He doesn't have, the mega high-end lawyers. I'm assuming that you're largely doing this out of the goodness of your heart. Am I correct in that?
It's not at my normal rate. I think that's fair to say. Yeah, no, it was challenging. It's like, as a lawyer, I run my own practice, so I have the opportunity to do cases that I consider important. To me, this is a really important case. And so, but I think you're right. I think that in the greater community outside of the world that we're speaking in now, it would be helpful to have some light on it, which is why I was glad to come on to this program. I think that LA rappers, I think they should be paying attention because, Drakeo's the test case. And if they can get away with it here, like, think about everybody.
Floodgates open.
Think about every rapper, any rapper in LA. And if they have, and I'll use air quotes, gang affiliations, and one of those gang members kills somebody, this opens the door for the prosecutors to start prosecuting people that don't have anything to do with the killing or the violence. And, there's an aspect where, prosecutors are like everybody else. There was the timing was really interesting here. There was that LA Times article about Drakeo. That was like on the front page of I think the style section of the LA Times that came out right before they filed the murder case. And, it's a trophy. He's a trophy, a big fish for them to try to take down, I think. And I think that added some, motivation or encouragement to them to go after him.
We have to just get to the point where it's it's more beneficial for their public image to just leave the shit alone instead of retrying it, because they're humiliated because they didn't get them the first time around. So they're like,
Right.
oh, let's double down. Let's really go for this again. We just have to get to the point where it's so embarrassing that they
Right.
realize that it's time to just abort ship and leave the guy alone.
I think that's exactly it. I mean, I work with prosecutors all the time, and you get the range, and there's some good prosecutors, good people that are doing their jobs. This has been really, like, from a lawyer legal perspective. And there's a lot of people in the legal profession that are very well respected that are outraged by this case. But for them to refile, and the way they did it, I think was really disturbing. We showed up last month for sentencing, not a word beforehand, not a courtesy call to his lawyer and saying, hey, which is normally what would happen. Hey, look, this is the office's decision. Here's why. They showed up in court with the two detectives who were, they were having it was really, it was hard. They were having a good time in court when they read out that they were refiling the charges, and the detectives who, I guess I understand it was a humiliating experience for them. They got beaten publicly, but they never should have brought the case, right?
It's so painful that he's sitting in a cell through all this.
He's sitting in a tiny, solitary confinement cell, which I think you probably read about in the article or have heard about.
Right.
Because he tweeted that his dreams had been crushed, and I'm going to take all my music down. And then he wrote, "Thank Detective Hardiman," right?
Right.
And so, that's all he tweeted. Some of the fans wrote, fuck Detective Hardiman.
You can't say anything about anybody online without expecting some percentage of your fan base to find that person's account and message them and say, fuck you.
Right.
That tweet, I believe it was, that Drakeo posted, actually was so sad, so depressing, because you're realizing that this is a guy that we all know to be a tough, strong guy, really regretting that he had ever tried to become a rapper because it had gotten him into this situation, and that he had genuinely wished that he had never tried to become an artist because it has been used against him so mercilessly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like it took all of the accomplishments that, if it wasn't a rapper, I mean, like somebody achieving that level of accomplishment and then saying, we're going to use that accomplishment, that artistry, and we're going to imprison you for life. And I think you nailed it. He spoke from a place of pain. He spoke from a place of, there's a part that being in jail, I've just know this from clients over the years. It's not a good place to be. Drakeo was in, general population. I think he was okay. And then he tweeted this, and the detective went to a different judge, not even our judge, and got him placed in solitary confinement in Suge Knight's old cell. I guess Suge had just moved out.
Symbolic.
Yeah. But it's there's high security in the jail, but this isn't high security. This is solitary. And so he's locked down 24 hours a day, except for a couple of breaks where he gets to go out, call his lawyer, gets to go outside into the yard a little bit, but is in one of those cages, like he's, the leader of the Mexican mafia, some large, powerful prison gang, for tweeting, I'm taking my music down and thank Hardiman. And he's remained in there for 8, almost 9 months now. And, we've asked the judge to undo all of this, to let him out. But, it's been to no avail.
And you could easily imagine a scenario in which Drakeo was on house arrest, sitting in his house with a fucking ankle monitor on, waiting out the last 9 months. And that maybe being an acceptable thing. But that's not the case.
No.
Instead, he's by himself in a cell.
He's by himself. I think there was something interesting that was raised in the article that was actually kind of resonated with me, which was about when we actually went to trial. And going from a tiny cell where you can reach out and touch all sides to being in a giant courtroom, and you're doing jury selection. So there's like 80 people in there and they're all staring at you. And it was tough because solitary, there's plenty of studies that how it impacts your body, your mind, your heart. I mean, it's considered torture by Amnesty International and other international organizations. And there's a lot of movements in the reform community to disallow solitary, but that's how he's been living.
And I'm sure a day or a week of solitary is brutal, but I mean, 9 months is
9 months. There's the side of him, I think you're saying he's an asshole, but I've gotten a lot of respect for him because he's been able to handle it and manage it with just a degree of strength that I think you rarely see. Instead of letting it break him, and he's had some tough times, but he's focused and focused on if we have to go to trial, focused on winning again. But it's been tough on him.
Right. So when is your estimate of when he's going to be able to seek justice again in a court of law? It's been pushed back, right?
Well, we're seeking justice tomorrow morning in Compton Courthouse. So what we did was file a request to the judge to use her powers as a judge to dismiss it under a section of the Penal Code called 1385. And so a judge has this power when either it's just in the furtherance of justice, which seems like a pretty fair case here, or when no reasonable jury could convict somebody.
Right.
So, I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic, right? I'd love the judge to step up, but that's a pretty, challenging thing to do when the DA's office is so invested in this case. Like this has become like
pet project for them, huh?
I mean, it's more than a pet project. They have spent so many resources, have multiple attorneys working on it. It's been their baby, and I think maybe a better hobby would be in order than trying to give a man life in prison for something he didn't do.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll see what happens tomorrow, and regardless, we got to keep trying to keep the chorus of people who are talking about this. We got to keep making that grow one way or another, whether it's just finding more and more big names that we can get to comment about it, or just creating more and more of a public outcry. And anybody who's sort of works in the journalistic world, I mean, the Guardian was great. I mean, I can imagine a scenario where if this really goes as far as it could, that we could see the New York Times getting interested in talking about it and stuff, because these really are like very far-reaching implications. It's not just one man's struggle.
Right, absolutely. And the thing is, when that case happened in San Diego, that was national. Like that was in the Washington Post and all over the place. Everybody was talking about it. It's a little bit harder to do the story. They're doing it again because it was such an outrage then. And then also, Draco's Draco, and he's not changed his attitude, towards kind of speaking out or being silenced by this prosecution. And so I think he's rough around the edges, I think, to some people, but that's the core and the soul of hip hop, is people coming out of tough areas, broken areas with over policing, with abuses against the citizens, and coming out and making art out of that. And so
and this ain't no regular rapper either. My man Drakeo is crazy. If there's anybody who's just watching this purely from a sort of social justice perspective, just know that one of the finest men to have touched a mic in the last however many years in LA in particular.
That's what I hear.
All right. Anything else that people at home should know, or things they should keep in mind if they want to support him? Or
no, I mean, I think you really nailed it. Is injustice in the dark, if nobody sees it,
right.
That's how injustice flourishes. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for your support. I know Drakeo is. Draco's talked about you a number of times over the time I've known him as an important and good dude in the rap community that's kind of really helped elevate LA hip hop in a way that I think LA hip hop and rap needed to be elevated. So, really, we just need the word out. We need people paying attention. We need people, on social media. We need people talking to the DA. We need the people in power to say, hey, you know what? You had your shot. You gave it everything you had. It didn't work out for you. Move on. It's not even, you don't even have to get to like, shouldn't have brought the first case in the beginning, or
what's done is done, right?
What's done is done, but like, let the man go home. This has been too much, too long, and just it's brutal what this has done to his family and to his soul. Just when they announce that they're gonna try again to give him life. So keep spreading the word, and I appreciate you having me here.
No, I appreciate you coming in. Let's definitely keep making noise about this thing.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Yep.
Hey, this has been No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. Check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. Like, comment, and subscribe, and go support Drakeo the Ruler, I guess. Listen to him on Spotify or something. Go follow the man on Instagram. Show him some support. I'm sure he's hearing about it from somebody.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.